Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
All right, first up is Tanya. Come on down. Usability and console gaming.
Shit, I was hoping not to be first. So, y'all, I talked earlier, but this is just a quick thing of my credentials. I do hold a STEM degree in human-computer interaction and user-centered design. So this is a great interest to me. And I like things to work and work very quickly and very easily because I am lazy when it comes to technology. I want to press one button and for things to work. That is not the case with the Kinect, or with the Xbox Sans Kinect. So why talk about this? I'm not reading the slide at you because I have 5 minutes and I already talk too fast as it is. But that's why I want to talk about these things. So I will move on. So I am one of those folks that got a Xbox One very recently, post them getting rid of the Kinect bundle. And one thing that I noticed was that without voice commands, or without the Kinect to do voice commands, it's actually very difficult and time-consuming to do basic functions like take a screenshot, start to Twitch stream, things like that. So as someone who's interested in usability, it annoyed me to no end because, I freely admit it, I had a PS4 at launch, I took a day off to go get this thing, and so I got spoiled by one-button press functionality, and when the Xbox One didn't have that similar functionality, it made me irritated, and I kind of fussed online a little bit and fussed in my inner circle about it. But these are just some things that I noticed that you can do with a Kinect and without a Kinect. I blatantly stole a screenshot from Kotaku from some article they had it comparing Xbox One and PS4 user interfaces. So who here has an Xbox One? Who has one with a Kinect? Who has one without a Kinect besides me? Who has just a Kinect? And the other thing that I didn't like is that if you had a Kinect on the 360, it doesn't work with the Xbox One. So you had to shell out another $150 or $100 to have a Kinect to work with your new $500 system, or $400, depending on when you bought it. So again, this is my personal experience. If others disagree, feel free to find me. We can chat about it. But I found the UI very confusing to use, very counterintuitive, because it was just like, here's a bunch of tiles, here's things you can do, but no clear way to manipulate those tiles and kind of put things the way I like them. Supposedly a new UI is coming out or came out late in the fall, and if it did come out, I either don't understand the Xbox UI well enough, or it just is still confusing even after the changes. The other reason I'm not that interested in a Kinect is because I literally don't have the space for it. It does require some room to get the most out of games that are Kinect enabled. The Xbox One Elite controller gives a lot more functionality to you, but you shouldn't have to pay double the cost of what a standard controller costs, which is already $60 for a peripheral, which is ridiculous, to get functionality that should be standard, in my totally not so humble opinion. So this is a case for me where user-friendly design comes at a higher cost, and I'm not spending $120 on a controller. I don't care what it does. But to me, this is another usability issue where to get that functionality, you have to spend even more money. So these are just considerations I thought about as better usability. Well, the main thing is if you turn your Xbox, you set it up, and there's no Kinect, give me other UI functions, give me other options to map the buttons. So this is just something I thought about. And since we're at a Microsoft-sponsored event, if someone is here from Xbox, I will happily talk to you. And if you want to give me a job about this, I will take it. I have no shame. But things like one button press, because right now without a Kinect, I have to double tap a button and hit the home button and hope I get the screenshot I want, which is really ridiculous. And then I have to go back into the game I'm playing to save that screenshot. Accessing your friends list. It is one button press, sort of, but it's a long button press, and you have to get out of the menu that you're already in. Twitch is a pain in the ass. Like, it literally took me a month to figure out how to stream on Twitch from the Xbox because of the snap function and everything else. And it should be, hey, one button, Twitch opens, therefore we go to stream. And trying to navigate between the store and everything else is kind of a pain because you have to kind of browse, and then even when you get to like the game area, you still can't just go, I want new games, I want what's on sale. So a better navigation would be greatly helped. Wow, and I had a typo. That shows you how quickly I put this slide together. So allowing users to reshuffle their UI layout when you're logged in on your computer and have it sync, kind of like when you change things with your iPhone and iTunes, and then when you turn on your Xbox, it then syncs to your preferences instead of trying to figure it out on the menu on the fly. So those are just some things I thought about that would, at least for me, make my Xbox experience better. I don't know how quickly I spoke. If we have any time for a question, we're done. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, hi. My name is Katie Davis. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Washington in the Information School, and I study the role of network technologies in different aspects of teens' lives. And recently, I guess it was about 2 months ago, I was introduced to this concept of a Finstagram. Does anyone have a Finstagram? Probably not, because I don't think there are any teenagers in here. But I found it really interesting, and I found a way to incorporate it into a recent book chapter I wrote about teens and emerging adults and their online identities. I found it particularly interesting because a lot of the work that I've done in the last couple of years that I've written about in a book I recently published with Howard Gardner called The App Generation is this idea of a packaged self. So the idea that teens, when they're going online, they feel, especially in online platforms where, like Facebook, where you kind of have to give your real identity, they feel this real pressure to be perfect and attractive and get a lot of likes on all their pictures. So we talked about this in our book, and I've heard a lot from talking to teens about this pressure to be perfect online. And I think a really good example of that, maybe some of you read this article I think it came out in September, about this girl in New York, Lily Heimowitz, called the prom queen of Instagram, and just how carefully she curates her Instagram feed. She has posted thousands of pictures on Instagram, but she actually only has a few hundred on it now because she constantly is going through and just weeding out ones that she doesn't find are totally perfect. Some of you, did anyone hear this American Life called Status Update? It was on I think around Thanksgiving. It's really interesting, the beginning of this program, listening to 13-year-olds talk about how carefully they choose the photos and just one really good photo a day of what they're going to post on Instagram. And then seconds later, they're monitoring how many likes they've gotten and what sort of responses they've gotten. And when I hear things like this and when I talk to teens, I think, wow, that's exhausting. That just takes a lot of time and energy and just nerves. Is this a good picture of me? Do I look good? And so when I read about this new trend of Finstagrams, I was really interested because I'm always interested in how teens are kind of taking the technologies they have and then making them work for them and what they need. And so if you're not familiar, if you didn't read this article, if you're not familiar with this idea of Finstagram, basically a lot of young people right now are creating fake Instagram accounts, but they're not really fake, they're just closed accounts. They're kind of in stealth mode where they're only friends with their close friends. They use different names and they kind of keep them very closed, and they can kind of in that space break free from the constraints of their typical Instagram. So they can kind of post more than one picture every day, and they can post ugly selfies, and they can post goofy things about themselves. So they're creating this more, the freer space on Instagram, which is this platform where they're typically supposed to be perfect. And so this is another example. This model, Australian model, Asena O'Neill, she has recently gone through her pictures on Instagram and changed the captions to what really was going on. So this one is kind of saying how what she was thinking, like, please like this photo. I put on makeup, curled my hair, did all this stuff just so that you would like this. Things that we don't really usually hear, we just see the output and the perfect part. So it's just something I think is really interesting, and there are a bunch more examples of where she's taken these beautiful shots of herself and said things like, you know, I didn't eat for days just to get myself looking like this. And it's kind of refreshing, kind of casting a new light on what's going on behind the scenes. So when I think about trends like this, what I'm seeing happening is teens are creating spaces for themselves online where they're deliberately being imperfect. And they're really kind of calling out the pressure they feel. They're pushing back against this pressure to be perfect online. And so I'm thinking that instead of, or maybe in addition to asking how is technology affecting teens' development, which is something that I focus a lot on, maybe we should also be asking how are teens shaping or reshaping technology to meet their developmental needs. That's it. 10 seconds to go.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Bob Mack. I'm from the cartoon editor of New Yorker magazine. What you're confronted. Oh, sorry. Okay, got 5 minutes, got to move. Okay, you see these images, they're incongruous images, weird and everything. Your job is, caption contest is to make something funny out of them. You had me at Olay. I'm afraid I can't discuss my other patients. Your last job sounds terrible. Have a hammer. I'd say you wanted an earlier flight. Hey, where do you see yourself in 5,000 years? Okay, the New Yorker was confronted with the idea of a caption contest in 2005. Honestly, all the other caption contests this is the contest. Everything else sort of comes, one's giving the imprimatur of the New Yorker. So the weird thing was, for a stodgy magazine like the New Yorker, how do you have one every week? You actually have to have a contest you enter, a contest you vote on, and a winner. So it's a whole 5-week process before the reveal happens, and you finally see which one wins. So here was, okay, let's hope for some nut allergies. Oh yeah, everybody liked that except, of course, people who have nut allergies. So the New Yorker is a really sensitive magazine. If you do a cartoon where you say a woman is talking to another woman and she's saying, I've only been gluten-free for a week, but I'm already annoying, you get more letters on that than anything. Okay. So we have all these entries, 2,006 million entries, 503 winners, weekly averager. Is that your chance of winning? Is that? Okay, you'd have, if you entered every single week, your chance of winning just by chance by the year 2026 would be 20%, and you would seriously should to think about your priorities if you spent that much time at the New Yorker contest, which many people do. Okay, Roger Ebert won after 107 entries. Actually, people have entered 450 times. He won with this caption. I'm not going to say the word I'm thinking of, which of course was fuck, which we never have in the New Yorker in a cartoon because children. Okay, so Peter McGraw and Phil Fernberg, cognitive scientists, said, we're going to figure out the contest. We're going to find out the rules that will help you win the contest. And what they came up with was, okay, the contest, more novel, it's likely to make the short list of captions. Punctuation, less capturation, don't yell. Fewer words and more abstract, so you can't imagine what was in the picture. Well, were they right? Well, look at this cartoon here. Objection, Your Honor, alleged killer whale. Here are all the captions. Here are all the captions that came in that were basically that caption. So when you look at novelty, the truth is people don't like novelty in humor. They like a little novelty in a cocoon of familiarity. They like the thing that they could have thought of. That's the most popular. So generally, if you actually look at all the things, what you really need is to be funny. Okay, that actually See, this is just sort of the footprint of humor. It really has nothing to do with humor itself. Okay, I worked at Microsoft with Eric Horvitz and Daphne Shahaf, and we tried to make this a little better. What we did was we used sort of linguistic analysis to cluster the similar caption, and we looked at various factors in which we also had Amazon Turkers look at both the image and rate captions, and we came up with prediction of 64%, which is lousy. 64%, which is the ground truth of what humans would do. So, back to humans. Okay, that's my human. That's Colin Stokes. He looks at all 5,000 to 10,000 captions that come in every week. He breaks them down into these categories. I take these categories and I send them to the editors at The New Yorker using SurveyMonkey. They rate the categories and then I pick the one I like. That's not true. I usually go with them. Okay, that's not the greatest system. What I've done recently is I'm using this system by data scientists at the University of Wisconsin. So I'm opening it up actually to everybody who ever won or who was finalist in the contest. So what happens there is now what I'm doing is crowdsourcing not only the user, but crowdsourcing the other side. And when you get there, it's actually pretty good ratings, okay? And what we will be doing actually on the New Yorker site, what will we be doing is we'll be opening up the contest in general in this way to everybody at the New Yorker site. Okay, but if none of these work for you, remember there's always the universal caption. Christ, what an asshole. What a misunderstanding. And I'd like you to join my professional network on LinkedIn. The other thing to remember is sometimes the very best caption is the simplest. It sort of makes you stop and think, doesn't it? I hope I have made you stop and think a little. Thank you.
Okay, I didn't get a lot of feedback about which of the topics I should speak on, so I took that as a challenge. We're going to do 5 Graybles here in 5 minutes. There we go. All right, so what you're looking at here is a neural network. Oh. You couldn't get the image. Well, you would have seen it dreaming about faces. What did we do with this? About 8 years ago, I built this along with a website called Sexy Face. And the idea was the neural network understands faces and perceptions of them so well, wow, I could even slow down, that you answer a couple questions about which faces you think are sexy, and then we can crawl through all of Facebook and find all of the faces that you would think are sexy for free. And for $5, we'll find all the people that think you're sexy. But the reality was that it was a Trojan horse for a UN project called Refugees United. The system learned how to understand faces so that it could reunite orphan refugees, of which there are about 1 million, with extended family members. And I'm on to the next one. This is the first and perhaps only presidential portrait taken with Google Glass, which I did at the White House at the first or second Pride White House celebration. And when he heard that there was some crazy woman with like blue fluorescent headgear on, he just had to meet me. Also, the Secret Service wanted to kick me out. So he came and chatted with me, and the real reason the reason I'm wearing it, you'll find out in the next slide, the reason he's there is because his smile is kind of ambiguous. I can tell you when he was looking at me, he wasn't smiling. He was shaking his head and just looking totally disgusted. We built a system for Google Glass based on work at my old undergraduate lab to do real-time facial expression recognition and give them to autistic kids so they can learn how to read facial expressions through natural interactions day-to-day throughout their lives instead of with cartoons on flashcards. It was actually the most interesting thing is Facebook just won a bidding war with Google over my lab turned startup, which did facial expression recognition on the last Republican debate. Okay, this kid is scientifically proven to be the cutest kid in the whole world. A poll of 2 scientists came to that conclusion. By coincidences, their mom and I. Felix is my son, was diagnosed with diabetes 4 years ago, slightly more than that, the worst Thanksgiving ever. And the reason I wore Google Glass is because when we got out of the hospital and we started collecting an enormous amount of data, I mean, we crashed Google Docs, the spreadsheet with all the data we collected, and we brought it back in for our first visit with the doctor, and she got angry that we were wasting her time. And I thought, this is crazy. You think diabetes is complicated? Try the brain. So we built a system called Jitterbug that actively predicted, we had to hack all of his devices, continuous glucose, Fitbit, everything. Little Python code, old Android phone, send it off to my personal server where it literally predict about an hour into the future whether his blood glucose levels will go high or low, and it was sending to me on my Google Glass, which is where I got a message that he would go low an hour from now while I was in the White House and he was in San Francisco. Medtronic just released a new technology 4 years later at $10 million in development that does the exact same thing. This is Jose Zamora. He claimed he wrote a blog post that went viral about how he was sending out 100 resumes a week and getting no responses. So he replaces the S's in his name with nothing, and suddenly Joe Zamora is getting all these responses. So USA News and World Report calls me up, says, is this plausible? I start quoting 1,000 research papers that says it's more than plausible. But I also thought, I have a database at one of my last companies, 122 million people. Why don't I go look and see what's different between every actual Joe and every actual Jose? Because I've only got 3 seconds left here, the punchline is we computed something called the tax on being different. And the tax for being Jose was $500,000 to $1 million in the tech industry. Just paid upfront through a fancier education, all the sorts of things he needed to get for the same work to be valued the same level. And finally, LGBT. This is really new research that I haven't shown anywhere before, but we looked at the migration patterns of LGBT entrepreneurs, and we found that if you take them into account, even accounting for how entrepreneurs tend to migrate towards San Francisco, New York, Seattle, and other places, that in the heads of these entrepreneurs, are migrating millions of jobs. So the story that you want business-friendly, pro-growth states like Texas, no, more jobs migrate out of them in the heads of entrepreneurs, particularly from marginalized groups, than ever go back as data center and call center jobs. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vivian. Latoya?
All right, so how many of you have actually been on Vine? Excellent. How many of you understand what makes a good Vine video? Kind of. Okay, let's go over this very, very quickly, because the first thing I realized while doing this is that it is impossible to explain what I want to explain in 5 minutes. So there's going to be a bunch of times where I'm like, yeah, we'll talk about that later. I'm sorry. So the easiest way to explain Vine is with a thing called Kanye's pen. All right, so I'm going to slow it down for a second, and we're going to watch it again. All the Vines I'll play at least twice because they go very, very fast. So Vine is a remix culture. That's the first thing you should know about it. It's people layering jokes underneath other memes, underneath other jokes, underneath other references. So Kanye's pen is actually, one, the concept, right? You click the pen for a Kanye song called Click, right? You see kids doing very popular dances while they're clicking this pen, and then they splice together a video of Kanye West who's freaking out the paparazzi, going, stop it, all y'all stop it. So once again, Kanye's pen. All right? So this is the anatomy of Vine. This is what makes Vine run, okay? This idea that we can layer together these experiences, these jokes, conversations about our identity, and remix it together into almost this new cultural way of talking that is very, very, very well used among teenagers. They also use cultural works that you see in other forms of media. And so also if you're... So if you're not familiar with the joke, read the caption. The caption here is, when you get a little health in a video game and some bullshit kills you. That is what this is based on. And so it's a way that people are culturally expressing themselves. It's a way that people are using language. And for me, as a person who runs a blog about race and pop culture, has been following particularly race in memes and race on the internet, Vine has become a fascinating thing to study about how teenagers are talking about race and identity. So Vine is kind of used to both challenge and reinforce stereotypes because of You don't even need the sound for that one, but I'll turn it on so you hear it. And there's a lot of ways that particularly young black teenagers are playing with their identity online and what people expect to see from them versus what they expect from themselves, including things that used to be so geeky that you'd be called white, now are just parts of the overall experience. And this one, again, is another complex joke. Listen to it. This one here? Oh, okay. Is that going to be better? Okay. Iridocyclitis is from a spelling bee. Where are these kids watching spelling bees, and why are they always on every part of the internet? Anyway, from a big spelling bee mistake that went viral. And so iridocyclitis was like all over. People were doing remixes of it. Like, it was ridiculous. It was on Vine for like 2 total weeks. So once again, the Harry Potter send up.
We got it, Leviosa. Expect a Patronum. Iridocyclitis.
A lot of this is also meta-commentary on your own identity or the way that other people perceive you in this Q Park video.
Yo, she's talking about Q.
No Asian guy looks like that.
Ha 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 ha, you mad? Yo, she's talking about Q.
No Asian guy looks like that.
Ha 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 ha, you mad? Yo, she's talking about Q.
So there's also other points where Q comes out on top. I wanted to put one of those in. We don't have time. Other ones, too, are about like other people's playing with their perception of who you are and your own identity. We'll get into gender in a second.
You guys heard this yet?
Bitch better have my money. Y'all should know me well enough. Bitch better.
So there's a lot of playing around the bounds of identity, and particularly like kind of cross-cultural mistakes are kind of the bread and butter of racial humor on Vine. Particularly this one, again from Q.
The
caption on this is, "I'm never singing Korean music again." Caption, "Niga" means you in Korean. He's actually, and then when a Vine is popular, a lot of times the Viners will do 3 or 4 versions of the same joke, just in different kind of scenarios. There's like 4 or 5 of these with Q. All right? And this is also King Bach. So King Bach is actually, he got the cover of New York Magazine late last year as being one of the most popular Viners of all time, right? And so he's made it into TV, he's transitioned over, and he does a lot of particularly race-based humor around stereotypes in African-American masculinity.
How are you 2 fine gentlemen doing this evening? I was wondering if you like, hey man, I should have shot with a nice old fat ass, bro. I came out like, say, you gonna give me your number.
Caption on this is what they hear when we talk. And so automatically too, on Vine, just like on what we now call Black Twitter, you start seeing a shifting of who the intended audience is and who the general speaker or default user is, right? It's no longer necessarily a whiteness. And I have a whole page in like the long version that's about kind of hip hop culture as a lingua franca, even along white kids. It's like a whole thing. We don't have time, so we'll go into that later. All right. Gender performance on Vine, it's also very complex. I didn't have time to go into it. It's just suffice it to say, female Viners are under more pressure than actually their male counterparts, and so it's very rare to see a female Viner without some kind of sexualized video in order to stay popular. They have to almost in some way show off their bodies. Men don't quite have those same requirements. There's a lot of other types of masculine performance, but this just happens to be a very cute one. I don't have to turn on the sound for this, you know it. It's picture time. There you go. But Vine influences popular culture in a way that a lot of places are overlooking, right? How many people know what the shmoney dance is? Oh, are you kidding? Okay, sorry. I didn't even put the video in. I was like, the shmoney dance is so old. And now I have to go back and edit this. Anyway, so there was an artist by the name of Bobby Shmurda that rose to fame. I will turn this down in a second so you can see it. That rose to fame because he had this ridiculous music video, and he does a very distinctive dance in the middle, right? And it was commented on, it was reproduced. Rihanna has a version of it when she's on Instagram. There's a bunch of people doing it, and it even made it to the NFL.
About a week ago. Fuck with us and then we tweaking. About a week ago.
Sorry, they changed the interface on the video, so I'm like, what? Anyway, so the nay-nay, the whip, things that you guys have probably seen on Ellen started on Vine, right? And they started with normally kids of color doing it and making it extremely, extremely popular. I'm not going to talk about the nanny web. We don't have time. But we can talk about Hit That Super Mario, which is one of my favorite vines of all time.
Dancing for Mario, lean with a rock with the do it. Yo, wait, swag out on the flow, nay, real quick, hit that elbow. Dancing for.
So there's actually a 1.5-minute long version of this on YouTube where the four of them are dancing. There's another version of it that they've done for various places, but it became popular once a lot of women on Vine started dancing to this video. It became a viral sensation. It was written up in Billboard. But unfortunately, the cultural creator of this, Caleb Reyes, who made the dance, and Eugene the Dream, who did the beat, neither of them actually got any money off of this because it's not their copyrighted material. Remember, Vine is a remix culture, and the way that our intellectual property rights and our copyright works means that these creators generally can't access this if they even are allowed to keep producing these types of things at all right? And so why talk about that part of this, right? Well, Tanya, yes, 1 minute, 0 seconds, okay. Tanya reminded me about this idea of like black cultural property being co-opted, but it's a little bit more than that, right? It's this idea that Vine kind of wants to be something else. So even as these black creators and these young creators are making these things that are making Vine super, super popular, what's happening is Vine is choosing to say, no, we're really not about that. We're not about any of these things, privileging white creator voices over black creator voices, and generally showing that they'd rather be a stop motion animation platform than the thing that is actually being currently popular, which, you know, Hugh Park actually discusses. That's the end. Thank you.
So the question I'm looking at is, did your face evolve to lie? And the reason I'm interested in this is that I'm working on a book about honesty and deception, and it's a book that starts with an evolutionary viewpoint that there really has been, throughout history, not just our history, but all animals and even plants, and arguably even things like yeast, a arms race between honesty and deception. Because if you think about it, it's almost always profitable to lie if you can get away with it, to say that you're better or stronger or faster than you actually are. But if all communication was lies, there wouldn't actually be any communication. And so from this evolutionary perspective, there's this arms race between the signaler, who may want to say that they're better than they are, and the recipient, who wants to demand something honest. And so one of the questions is, what about our face, which we tend to think of as the sort of point we look at when we try and figure out whether we believe someone, is, did our face evolve to reveal emotion, or to, to reveal our feelings, or to be completely under our control? Wait, that just skipped something, sorry. This is, there we are. Okay, so culturally, we tend to not think that lying is a very good idea. And there have been a variety of philosophers, most famously Kant, who basically said, you should not lie. He's famous for basically saying, if there's a murderer at your door and he's after someone in your house and he asks you, is this person there? You should tell him, because maybe he'll go, that there's some other bad effects that can follow on. More recently, Sam Harris is a contemporary philosopher who's come out with a book called Lying that basically says around the same thing, that in some way that all kinds of bad things will happen if you lie, or they could happen, but that you could just simplify your life by just constantly telling the truth. And that, I think, is a fairly naive view about the world. But our views about the world in general do tend to be naive. If you think about how we think about, we're going to get to faces in a minute, I didn't forget. How we think about language, for instance, there's something that linguists call the conduit metaphor. When people think about how communication works, it's like, I have a thought in my head, and what I am doing, and lectures kind of work this way a little bit, but you're still trying to figure out if I'm reliable enough, if I'm interesting enough and knowledgeable enough that you should believe me. So it's not quite that I take these ideas and go, and they land in your head sort of pure and as they came from mind. But our very language itself uses the metaphor of like a conduit to think about how it works. You know, you say things like, she got her ideas across to him, or your note conveyed happiness. It's about flow. The reason that these conceptions about lying and conversation are important for technologies, and when we design things, we tend to design them with these goals in mind, that the ideal world is one where nobody lies. And the ideal world is one in which when people communicate, it's just totally straightforward. And I think from a very engineering perspective, and I spent a long time at MIT, so I've been around a lot of engineers, and I am one, there tends to be this goal of efficiency. And that what we should be doing is, to the extent that communication doesn't work like this, or that people can prevaricate, that the goal of, if you're trying to do social good with technology, is to make it so that people can't lie and that communication become much more straightforward. If you think that life is more complicated than that, it's really important to understand why, in a somewhat counterintuitive way, you might want to defend lying and unclear communication. So one of the, this was actually a picture from a like 9-minute compilation of Christmas present fails, of videos that, but being in a hurry, I wasn't able to embed any of that, so you just have this little screenshot. But you can go to YouTube and watch it. It's a little slow. But it's like all these pictures of kids getting presents that they didn't like and their reactions to them. And if you think about for those of you who've been around small children, one of the most important things we do when kids are like old enough to start like dealing with other people is we teach them to lie. We teach them, you don't say, I really hated this when someone gives you a present. You say yes to a lot of things you want to say no to. You don't stare at that like interesting person with one arm over there. You don't say ooh when they walk by. There's just like you're constantly teaching kids not to say what they're thinking. So even from a common sense level, if you start thinking about it, if everyone was like that toddler who is just bursting out all the time saying what you think, all of civilization would fall apart. Immediately, we would have no more society. So we have to be very careful of people who are trying to invent worlds in which that is happening. But from the facial expression studies, one of the most influential, do I actually have that little time left, or is that not moving? Okay. Oh yes. We don't know where we are here.
Nope, we don't know where we are.
Okay, I will go fast. Okay, I will go fast. So Ekman was a very influential, and still is, in terms of facial expression. What he's famous for is both work on the universality of faces, that they're very, very innate, but he's a lot about lie detection, and the idea that your face kind of emotion is just an outpouring of emotion, that the way you feel comes out in your face and it shows, and that we can do all these things to detect what people are really thinking. That is a fairly problematic view, and one of the arguments against it, I'm going to go quickly here, is the one that says, in the sort of vocabulary of evolutionary theorists, obligate communication. It's like a cat is an obligate carnivore. They just have to eat meat. So obligate communication of information would often not be in the interest of the organism. In other words, that things do not, including your own face, should not have evolved to get you in trouble. That doesn't make evolutionary sense. It's supposed to, things generally evolve for the benefit of it. If you would be getting into trouble all the time by telling the truth, your face is not going to evolve to make it impossible for you to have control over it. So this is actually a fairly heated debate in the world of evolutionary theory and exactly how the face evolved, but it basically seems that it's kind of fallen in, as common sense would tell you, in the space where there's a lot of immediate communication that's very, very fast, but that what's interesting is the extent to which we do have control over faces, over expression, and what are the times when we don't, and that it looks like most of it has evolved for cooperative communication, but with enough control to deal with non-cooperative communication. which is very important to recognize in this era of an increasing number. This is a fairly primitive one. This is a at-home USB polygraph, which is marketed partly as a child's game, but if you look at some of the other marketing materials, it looks like you can have an angry spouse holding you down and lie detecting you, in which they will probably find out that you're upset, but they probably knew that anyway. But what, on a more sophisticated level than this, there is an increasing amount of work in biosensing, et cetera, as social interfaces. And there's work now in saying, even with your camera phone, you can see blushing that's invisible to the human eye, and that gives you a much better sense of what someone's underlying emotion is. We're moving into an era where we actually are going to be able to see more of the non-communicative emotional response of others, and so understanding much better how our faces evolved over an enormous amount of time to enable the type of sociability we have now is really important for understanding how we want to deal with emotion in interfaces. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anil Dash. I have no slides. You're welcome. I guess my slides would be terrible. Never read the comments. Don't read the comments. How many people have heard somebody say that, seen somebody tweet that at you? Like everybody, right? I'm a person who has left comments. I'm a commenter. I've been a person of comment. And I've made comment boxes that people can type in for many, many years. And in fact, one of the first times I was in this room was about almost a decade ago, and Clay Shirky had a class with some of his students were talking about, we built, it was actually very interesting and an elaborate web application. They said, and we put a standard comment box under it. And the example they used was from a tool called Movable Type that I used to build that was a comment box. And it was only a few years past when we'd made it, and that one of these sort of brilliant students here would just sort of describe it as that's how comment boxes work. At the time, I thought it was really exciting. Right? We made the standard. We made the default. It wasn't that great, actually, as it turns out. The assumptions of how we built those technologies in 2001, 2002, when a lot of people were building a lot of early comment boxes in social media, were actually probably the same assumptions that date back to the earliest social apps on what would become the internet in general, right? So if you put something in this fridge here, in this sort of academic environment, and you put your Post-it note on it, and you write your name, and you say, this is my sandwich, there's really no verification about that Post-it note, because there doesn't need to be, because the context is known, and the stakes are low. Well, I mean, sandwiches are great, but the stakes are pretty low. And what happens out on the web is the first sort of generations of software were kind of in a really similar context. The places you were responding to what people were saying were a fridge in an academic context, and it was okay. And we were building the tools thinking the internet still worked that way. And it's funny because the counterexamples were already countless and obvious, right? Email was already getting spammed because it never had real authentication or real identity or real accountability or real persistence built into it. And even though the examples were so obvious, we didn't fix it. And I still am astounded by that, because it's, like I said, it's obvious in retrospect. But what was clear was how good it could be. So we built those tools in, like I said, the early days of blogging. It's like 2000 to 2003 or 4. I got married in 2005, and the majority of the people who attended my wedding were people I met in the comments on my blog. Don't read the comments. So I have a visceral, deep, and emotional objection when we say that the state of affairs today should be that it's normal to say don't read the comments. There are a lot of reasons. As we've heard in a couple conversations today, language really matters. If we describe things as trolling as opposed to abuse, and we take it out of the realm of being a crime and into sort of sounding like an annoyance, things change. Language matters a lot. And I can go deeper into that, but what I think about more is I live very close by in the neighborhood in Alphabet City, and have lived there for most of the last 20 years. And invariably, when I moved there for the first time, it was described as a bad neighborhood, right? It's not a bad neighborhood. It never was. But the things that people use to describe it as a bad neighborhood, especially, are not true today. It is significantly less violent crime, significantly less chance of random people being victimized by any range of threats or dangers. And so even if we accepted that it once was a bad neighborhood, those issues have been remediated. But if it were to be consigned as that the nature of the place is that it's a bad neighborhood, there would be very little impetus or incentive to fix it. And today when I hear, and I know there's the joking sort of reflexive cynicism that we all have when we're very, very fluent in technology and media, where we say, never read the comments, they're full of assholes. And there's a very legitimate part which is about self-care, which is if you write a piece and people are flaming you and attacking you and hounding you and going after you with all kinds of abuse, then obviously you don't need to subject yourself to it, and you should choose not to if that's what you need to do to take care of yourself. But the broader conversation I think we end up with is when we say never read the comments, don't read the comments, we're accepting that the natural state of affairs is that our conversation, our dialogue online is going to result in abuse, especially to underrepresented folks and marginalized folks and all the usual groups you would expect to be targeted. And that's actually, I think that's pretty comprehensible. I think that's something people understand is, oh yeah, we shouldn't write that off. We shouldn't dismiss it. But also, I actually have been saying this for years, and I wrote about it a lot of times, like if your website's full of assholes, it's actually your fault. You've caused that to happen, and you should be held accountable for it. And there's a really big leap that I don't understand why we don't make when we say, you know, let's take YouTube, where the comments are sort of notoriously awful. Maybe they're getting better, I don't really know, because I don't look at them, because don't read the comments. But this is a company that I think, and I might be getting the details wrong, but I think Google Alphabet is like, we want to put a driverless car on the moon, right? Like that's vaguely in their ambitions. And they have people working on that with infinite resources, and they're like, we're going to do that. And then over here you say, could you just not have open threats of violence on a YouTube clip that's about making a sandwich, right? And they're like, that's too hard. There is no way. We have all the smartest people in the world, but that is a bridge too far. And I was like, what if you had more money than almost any institution in the history of humanity? Could you do it then? And I was like, well, we do have that, but we're still working on it. And I think there's a question of prioritization, and there's a question of what matters, but some part of the culpability, some part of the reason it seems intractable is because we all participate in saying, well, just don't look there. Don't look in the comments. Of course they're a cesspool. And this is true on Twitter. This is true on every network. I'm not singling anybody out. It's true on tools that I built. You know, I have been harassed and doxxed by people using software I created. That sucks. It sucks. And part of me wants to say, well, don't read the comments, because then it's not my fault. But I made the tools. And if I'd have thought about it for another couple days, months, maybe years, I would have realized where it was going. I would have realized what we empowered. But I didn't. And a lot of us didn't. And that's where I want to kind of get to the last point, which is the biggest reason I don't want us to abdicate our shared responsibility, and that I don't want us to refrain from holding these companies accountable, is the upside. Like I said, the majority of the people that were with me on the day I got married, I met through the comments. Like the potential, people I still work with or you know, create projects with or am inspired by and connected with in a meaningful lifetime way were responding to these ideas. And if I couldn't look in there, if I couldn't look in that box down there and see what people say, the loss to my life would be unfathomable. Like I wouldn't have any of the things that I care about. I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have my child. Like I wouldn't have everything I hold most dear. And that's the motivation, right? That is the reason I think we can actually just reclaim this thing that was in a very idealistic era, the best thing about the internet. The thing that we wanted, the thing we were promised was it was going to bring us closer together. We were going to find our tribe. We were going to find our people. Whatever you remember, right? You remember the rhetoric in the 90s, like whatever your interest is, that other person that's into it, you're going to find them. It was true for a moment for some of us. It can be true at scale for a lot of people. All it takes is actually paying attention, some investment, some amount of innovation and invention, and all of us collectively to say, yes, we probably should read the comments. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go fast like I'm on crystal meth, so just follow. I like to begin with OkCupid. Hello. My friend Franklin, who isn't into internet dating, came across your profile through my account, and he's been all over me about getting in touch with you. He said you seem like a beautiful woman and who has found balance in all aspects of life. I didn't tell him I was going to contact you, but if you write him at this address, he will send you a picture. First question. Was this a scam? Probably. Second, more interesting question. How desperate was I to find love? And how much personal risk would there be for me if I actually took this opportunity? I call this the Powerball question. The third question was something I came to later, which is, what if the risk actually wasn't mine, but somebody else's? For instance, what if somebody wanted to ruin some guy's life, and they contacted me asking me to send something to an email address for him, and then told the guy's wife that women were writing him, and then she checked the mail, and you get the rest. So welcome to my life, which is something I'm talking about in a book called Strange Intimacy, Touching Social Media, which I've already been told is a gross title. I was originally going to call this book Strange Familiars. I liked that name because it was an inversion of Stanley Milgram's term, familiar strangers. Familiar strangers are people who recognize each other by face, but because they physically come in contact each day, but they don't know much more about each other than that. By contrast, strange familiars are people who touch us or whom we touch, but whom we've not yet physically encountered. And I mean touch in two senses here. Emotionally, as in that was touching, and also skin-based, especially when we talk about the physical repercussions of having strange familiars, like stalking, assault, the kinds of things we've been talking about today. Notice that I'm using the word familiar as a noun here, the way they used to do it in Middle English. Like you would call your familiars your servants or household members or other family members with whom you were intimate. As a noun, the term familiar reminds us that intimacy takes a range of forms. It can be sexual. It can be an exercise in trust or risk. It can reflect differing beliefs about attachment and detachment. But no matter what, we use the word intimate to signify a significant relation at the level of the body. The intimacy I'm interested in for this particular book is the kind that feels of the body, but is in fact over distance. It's a sort of intimacy that leads people to debate whether certain online practices are empowering or traumatizing, or both of these. Traditional media theories speak about this type of intimacy in their different ways. Cinema people talk about it through the power of the gaze. Television theories talk about the glance. Malcolm Gladwell had a little bit to say about glance in his book, Blink. And all of these work in part for what I'm trying to get at, but they don't get at all of it. The computer science notion of haptic visuality, shout out to Tom Igoe, what's up, is closer to what I'm after because it explicitly links things like the eye and the skin. But remember, I'm interested in touching both in the physical sense and the mental one. So going after 10 million words, I came to the word grab. I like it because it combines the phenomena of touch with the politics of uncertainty. Think, for instance, of terms like land grab or attention grab or even up for grabs. So now we're a long way from internet dating, and I'm going to take you a little farther still. But stay with me, because I want to show you what a theory of grabbing can do for us in a time of strange intimacy beyond the world of dating sites. So in the news today, after what seems like an endless stream of police brutality cases, the push has grown strong to equip every police officer with a body camera in the interest of public safety. But this relatively straightforward belief in omnipresent cameras for good, otherwise known as surveillance, has already been critiqued. And what doesn't get talked through is the way that images grab us emotionally, physically, and how these images are themselves grabbed at 3 levels. The screen level, which we've been talking about, editing, cropping, filtering, upvoting, forwarding, remixing, facial matching, so forth. Beneath the screen, through metadata, utilized by companies in the police industrial complex like Canon, Hewlett-Packard, all those folks who make the products that work with your body cameras. This is subject to zero regulation because of the state-based nature of policing. And the skin level, which we've talked about before. One more second, promise. I know it's cheeky, but I'm going to circle back to my dating life now. Very soon after I got the OkCupid contact, I noticed that my profile had been viewed by somebody who matched exactly the description of this mystery guy who wasn't normally online. Had this fellow convinced his friend to get online, I wondered? Maybe the 2 incidents were unrelated. I don't know. He didn't contact me, and I sure as shit didn't contact him. Every day, I weigh my desire to find my new love against what feels like an 80 or 95% chance that all internet dating will blow up in my face. Basically, I'm in a space of harm reduction. But it's okay, because I don't really need to go on dates anymore, and I have cats. Things are more dire when it comes to police brutality. I think of the hundreds of companies serving the police industrial complex, a bit like I think of my mystery matchmaking pal on OkCupid. Maybe they're sleazy. Maybe they're serving a legitimate need. Either way, we cannot trust them to take care of us because we're not paying their bills. The police are. But there's also the Powerball question to consider. We want protection from criminals. We want accountability from police. We want some shot at limited consensual casual sex without having our bank account drained through an internet scam. If there's one thing police camera advocates and dating site users have in common, it's this. We both need to get familiar with strange intimacy because it's already familiar with us. Thank you.